The ocean, the vast, uncharted frontier that covers over 70% of our planet, has always been a source of wonder and mystery. From ancient myths of sea monsters to modern scientific explorations, the deep waters have captivated our imagination and filled us with both awe and fear. But what if we told you that beneath the waves, in a place deeper than the Mariana Trench, there exists an anomaly so profound, so unfathomable, that it could rewrite everything we know about life itself? In this story, we embark on a journey to the very edge of the ocean, where science, mystery, and the unknown converge. Here, in the deepest, darkest abyss, an expedition uncovers a secret buried beneath the ocean floor. Alien life forms, unlike anything humanity has ever encountered. They are not merely creatures of flesh and bone. They are something far more extraordinary, an intelligent, multidimensional species that challenges our understanding of existence. And as the team dives further into the depths, they discover an ancient living city untouched by time that holds the key to unlocking an intergalactic civilization's greatest mystery. But this discovery comes at a price. What lies beneath the waves is far more dangerous and transformative than anyone could have ever imagined. So, brace yourself for a journey into the heart of the unknown. The ocean's edge awaits. The vastness of the ocean has always been a realm of the unknown. To humanity, it's both a source of life and a terrifying void, stretching out endlessly beyond the horizon. But for a select few, the ocean is not just a body of water. It's the last great frontier of exploration. Scientists, adventurers, and dreamers have long yearned to uncover the mysteries hidden beneath the surface, to answer the questions that have echoed through generations. What lies in the deepest parts of the sea? Are we truly alone in the universe? This story begins with an extraordinary mission, a call to venture into the heart of the unknown. An elite team of scientists, engineers, and explorers has been assembled for a once-in-a-lifetime expedition. Their goal is simple: to map the uncharted regions of the Pacific Ocean, searching for new life forms and uncovering the secrets of the deep. But what they find is far beyond their expectations, and it will change the course of their mission and their lives forever. The mission is led by Dr. Emily Hayes, a renowned marine biologist with a passion for discovering new species and unearthing the ocean's hidden treasures. Her reputation precedes her, having made groundbreaking discoveries in marine ecosystems. She's considered one of the foremost experts in her field. Alongside her are Captain Miles Walker, a seasoned submariner with years of experience in the most perilous depths of the ocean, and Dr. Simon Lee, a brilliant physicist with a particular interest in the mysterious energy fields that exist at extreme oceanic depths. Together, they form the core of a team tasked with a mission that promises to push the boundaries of human knowledge. As the crew boards the state-of-the-art submarine, the Abyssal Explorer, anticipation buzzes in the air. This is no ordinary dive. The Abyssal Explorer is equipped with cutting-edge technology, advanced sonar mapping systems, bioscanners, and even artificial intelligence designed to assist in navigating the most treacherous of waters. They are not just looking for new species. They are on the hunt for a discovery that could revolutionize science. Their destination is a newly discovered trench, deeper than the Mariana Trench, a place so deep that the pressure would crush anything that dared to enter without the protection of advanced technology. The trench had been a mystery for centuries, seemingly devoid of life, but also holding strange anomalies that had caught the attention of researchers worldwide. This was the place where the ocean's secrets were waiting to be unlocked. As the submarine descends into the blackened waters, the crew begins to feel the weight of the unknown pressing in on them. The familiar hum of the engine provides a sense of comfort, but the vast, crushing emptiness outside the hull of the ship is both awe-inspiring and unnerving. Every passing minute takes them deeper into a world where sunlight can no longer reach, and where darkness seems to stretch on forever. The first few hours of the descent pass without incident. The crew monitors the readings closely, watching as the submarine descends deeper and deeper into the abyss. At this depth, the ocean is a place of complete silence, broken only by the occasional ping of sonar. But as they reach the deeper layers of the trench, the atmosphere inside the submarine shifts. The sensors begin to pick up strange readings, anomalies that defy explanation. Captain Walker, who has made countless dives in the past, frowns as he reviews the data. "This doesn't make sense," he mutters. "We're picking up energy signatures, but there's nothing down here that should be causing them." Dr. Hayes leans in, intrigued by the data. "Could it be some form of geothermal activity?" she asks. But even as she says it, she knows that geothermal readings don't match the intensity of the energy signals they're picking up. This is something new, something far more complex. As they continue their descent, the anomalies intensify. The team begins to feel the weight of something larger than themselves bearing down on them. They've come to the deepest, darkest part of the ocean, and now, it seems, the ocean is beginning to respond to their presence. Suddenly, the lights of the submarine flicker, and the sonar begins to hum erratically. A low rumbling fills the air. The crew looks at one another, their faces filled with a mix of concern and excitement. Whatever is down here, it's aware of them now. "Keep going," Dr. Hayes urges, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "We're on the verge of something incredible. We need to push forward. We need to put..." The submarine presses deeper into the trench, and as the hours pass, the strange energy readings grow more intense. The crew members can feel it now, a presence, an awareness just beyond their reach. It's as though something is watching them, waiting. The deeper they go, the stronger the feeling becomes. The ocean is alive. And then, at the edge of the abyss, something happens that no one could have predicted. A sudden flash of light illuminates the dark waters outside the submarine. It's bright, unnaturally bright, and for a moment, the crew is blinded by it. The sensors go haywire, their screens filling with chaotic data. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the light fades, leaving the crew in stunned silence. "What was that?" Captain Walker asks, his voice tense with disbelief. Dr. Hayes stares at the screen, her heart racing. "I don't know, but I think we've just discovered something that shouldn't exist. The mission has just begun, but already they've stumbled upon something that will shatter everything they thought they knew about the ocean and about life itself." The flashes of light that had momentarily blinded the crew of the Abyssal Explorer were no fluke. As the submarine continued its descent, the phenomenon repeated itself. This time, however, the crew was prepared. Their eyes adjusted to the darkness. What they saw was beyond anything they could have anticipated, a sprawling, multicolored pattern that flickered and danced across the ocean floor like a living light show. It was unlike any bio-luminescent organism they had ever encountered, as if the very ocean itself was trying to communicate with them. Dr. Emily Hayes felt a rush of excitement and trepidation. This isn't natural," she whispered, more to herself than to the others. The patterns weren't random, they were too structured, too purposeful. They seemed to form complex geometric shapes that pulsed in a rhythm, a language of sorts, or perhaps an invitation. The light seemed to pulse in time with the submarine's movements, almost as if it were aware of their presence. The patterns began to intensify, filling the ocean around them with an eerie, radiant glow. "Captain, slow the descent," Dr. Hayes ordered, her voice shaking with the magnitude of what she was witnessing. "We need to study this." Captain Miles Walker nodded, his fingers gripping the control panel. "Slowing now." As the submarine came to a halt, the light show outside continued, growing more intense with each passing moment. The crew had entered an area of the trench that was rich with unexplained phenomena. The sensor readouts on the console went haywire, fluctuating wildly as if struggling to process the immense energy in the surrounding waters. "Look at these readings," said Dr. Simon Lee, the physicist on board, his eyes wide with disbelief as he scanned the data. "This isn't just bioluminescence. These readings suggest electromagnetic fields of unimaginable strength, and they're in sync with the light patterns we're seeing." Dr. Hayes leaned over his shoulder, scrutinizing the data. The electromagnetic signatures were unlike anything they had encountered before, but what was most puzzling was the pattern, the strange mathematical precision of the energy fields. The data was showing coherent pulses, as if the energy was being deliberately shaped, like a signal from the depths of space. "They're communicating," she muttered under her breath. It felt absurd, but deep down, she knew it was true. Whatever this was, it was conscious. "We need to investigate further." The crew members exchanged nervous glances. The Abyssal Explorer was equipped with the best technology available, but even with all of their tools, they were stepping into unknown territory. The trench had been thought of as a silent, barren wasteland, a place where the ocean's darkness absorbed all life. But now it seemed that the trench had a heartbeat, a pulse. "Take us closer," Dr. Hayes instructed. "I need to get a clearer image of what's going on down there." Captain Walker hesitated for only a moment before following her directive. He guided the submarine closer to the glowing patterns. The closer they got, the more intense the light became, until it seemed to engulf the vessel, casting eerie, pulsating shadows across the walls of the submarine. The crew members' faces glowed with the strange light, their eyes wide with a mix of awe and unease. Then, as they neared the center of the light, something extraordinary happened. The light abruptly vanished. For a moment, the crew sat in stunned silence, the darkness of the deep ocean pressing in on them. It was as if the entire trench had swallowed the light whole. The submarine was now surrounded by complete blackness, the kind of darkness that seemed to exist beyond the concept of time itself. The crew's lights flickered, and the eerie hum of the submarine systems echoed in the oppressive silence. "What just happened?" Dr. Lee asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," Dr. Hayes replied, "but I think whatever is down here is watching us, and it's more intelligent than we thought." The moment stretched on, tension thick in the air. And then, without warning, the light returned, but this time it was different. The patterns were gone, replaced by something far more intentional. Slowly, the glowing forms coalesced into shapes that the crew could identify. They weren't random or abstract anymore. They resembled creatures, strange biomechanical life forms with flowing organic appendages that moved like tendrils through the water. They glowed with a soft, ethereal light, pulsing in a rhythmic pattern. Each creature appeared to be formed of both biological material and some kind of metallic substance, as if the line between organic and mechanical had long since blurred. "Look at that," Captain Walker muttered, his voice thick with disbelief. He was staring at the image on the monitor, where one of the creatures had slowly approached the submarine, its glowing body illuminating the water around it. It was no longer a question of whether these creatures were alive. They clearly were, but what were they? Where had they come from? And perhaps most importantly, how were they able to communicate with the submarine in such a precise, almost calculated manner? The creature outside the submarine seemed to react to their presence. It began to move in a circular pattern, its movements synchronized with the pulsing of the light. Dr. Hayes could feel a shift in the atmosphere. There was a weight to the silence, a gravity to the moment. It was as though they were no longer just observers, but part of an ancient ritual unfolding before them. "We need to communicate with them," Dr. Hayes said, her voice filled with wonder and excitement. "This is a sentient species, and they're showing us something." "I don't think it's that simple," Dr. Lee countered. "These creatures might be more advanced than anything we've ever encountered. We don't know their intentions. For all we know, they're assessing us, or even manipulating the environment around us." But Dr. Hayes was undeterred. Her scientific curiosity burned hotter than ever. "We can't turn back now. If they're trying to communicate, we have to find a way to respond." The crew remained silent for a moment as they all absorbed the enormity of the situation. Here they were, deep beneath the ocean's surface, face to face with beings that defied all known biology, beings that seemed to transcend the boundaries between the organic and the artificial. And somehow they had become part of this strange interaction. Then, the unthinkable happened. The glowing form outside the submarine reached out with what appeared to be a tendril stretching toward the hull. It was a slow, deliberate movement, as though it were testing the waters, or perhaps the crew's resolve. The moment it touched the submarine, the sensors went wild. The readings spiked into the red zone, an overwhelming surge of energy coursing through the vessel's systems. The submarine's lights flickered and dimmed, and a strange sound filled the cabin, a rhythmic hum, not unlike the pattern of the creatures outside. The crew felt a strange pressure in the air, as though the very molecules around them were vibrating. The walls seemed to pulse with energy. And then, the light in the water brightened again, this time in sync with the hum, as if the creatures were amplifying the energy field. "We need to get out of here," Captain Walker said urgently, his hand on the control panel, ready to pull away. But Dr. Hayes, her gaze fixed on the tendril touching the hull, shook her head. "No, we've come too far. We need to understand this. We need to learn from them." The tension was palpable, the crew divided between caution and curiosity. The light outside the vessel continued to pulse, and the creatures swam in hypnotic circles. The ocean, once thought of as a silent, empty void, had revealed itself to be something far more dynamic, and perhaps far more dangerous. But one thing was certain: this was no ordinary discovery. They were standing on the precipice of something greater than they could have ever imagined. The trench had not been a barren wasteland. It was a living, breathing ecosystem, teeming with intelligence beyond human comprehension. And whatever secrets it held, they were waiting to be unlocked. The discovery of the glowing biomechanical creatures was just the beginning. The crew of the Abyssal Explorer had known they were venturing into the unknown, but nothing could have prepared them for the next phase of their journey, when they stumbled upon an ancient, living city buried deep in the heart of the trench. As the crew continued to study the strange energy patterns and glowing forms surrounding them, they became increasingly aware that the creatures were no longer the only anomaly in their midst. It wasn't long before the sonar began picking up something else, something much larger and far more complex. "Captain, take a look at this," Dr. Lee said, his voice tight with excitement. His fingers flew across the console, his eyes fixed on the screen as the sonar readings grew more and more intense. "There's a structure down here, something massive. It's not a natural formation." Dr. Hayes joined him at the console, her eyes scanning the readings. The shape was unmistakable, an enormous geometric structure seemingly embedded into the ocean floor. At first, it appeared to be a series of jagged peaks or spires, but upon closer inspection, the pattern was too regular, too deliberate to be a natural formation. The walls were smooth and symmetrical, and the way they reflected the submarine's sonar waves indicated that the structure was made of a material far stronger than anything the team had encountered in the depths of the ocean. Is it artificial?" Dr. Hayes asked, a note of disbelief in her voice. "It's hard to say," Dr. Lee replied, his brow furrowed. "But the readings are consistent with something far beyond human technology. We're looking at a structure that could be thousands, even millions of years old." The crew fell silent, the weight of the discovery settling over them. They had come to the trench to study new life forms, but now they had uncovered something that threatened to rewrite history itself, a city buried in the deepest parts of the ocean, waiting to be uncovered. "Captain, I think we need to go closer," Dr. Hayes said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were alight with anticipation. "We can't just sit here, we need to investigate." Walker hesitated, his fingers hovering over the controls. He was no stranger to danger, but the deep ocean had a way of testing even the most experienced of explorers. They had already encountered the biomechanical creatures whose intentions were still unclear. Now they were facing a structure that could belong to an entirely unknown civilization. "We're in uncharted territory here," Captain Walker said. "We don't know what we're dealing with." "I understand. But if this is a city, if it's a place that has been hidden from us for so long, it could contain information we can't afford to ignore," Dr. Hayes replied. "We're already this far down. We can't turn back now." After a long pause, Captain Walker gave a reluctant nod. He trusted Hayes's judgment and knew that the potential for discovery outweighed the risks, at least for now. With a deep breath, he guided the submarine forward, slowly approaching the structure. As they drew closer, the scale of what they were seeing became even more overwhelming. The city, or whatever it was, seemed to stretch out in every direction, an intricate labyrinth of towering spires and vast interconnected networks. The walls were covered in intricate symbols and glowing lines that pulsed with a soft, otherworldly light. It's alive," Dr. Hayes whispered, her voice filled with awe. "What do you mean?" asked Dr. Lee, his face lit by the glowing symbols outside. "I mean, it's not just a structure," she explained, her eyes scanning the glowing patterns. "It's like the city is pulsing, almost like it's breathing. The patterns, the lights, they're too coordinated. This isn't just architecture, it's some kind of organism." The realization hit the crew like a shockwave. The city was not just an ancient relic, it was somehow interconnected with the environment, an entity in and of itself. It wasn't just built into the ocean floor, it seemed to be part of it, as though the city's very existence was tied to the surrounding abyss. "Are we interacting with it?" Captain Walker asked, his voice low. He seemed almost afraid to voice the question, as if doing so might make the reality too terrifying to confront. "We might be," Dr. Hayes said. "We might be interacting with something far beyond our comprehension." As the submarine drew closer to the heart of the city, the glowing lines and symbols became even more intricate. It was as if the entire city was a vast neural network, with each building, every structure, playing a role in a larger system. The light patterns outside seemed to pulse in response to the submarine's movements, guiding them deeper into the heart of the city. "We're picking up something new," Dr. Lee said, his fingers rapidly typing commands into the console. "There's a signal. It's faint, but it's there. It's not coming from the creatures, but from deep within the city. Can you trace it?" Dr. Hayes asked, her eyes narrowing. "I'll try," Dr. Lee said, his face illuminated by the screen as he worked. "But these readings, they're unlike anything I've seen before. It's like the signal is coming from some sort of core, deep beneath the surface. The deeper they went, the more the city seemed to come alive. The walls of the city began to shift and warp, as though the very material of the structures was moving, growing, responding to their presence. The sense of being watched grew stronger with each passing moment. "There's something down there," Dr. Hayes said, her voice filled with urgency. "We have to go deeper. The signal is coming from the core of the city." "I don't like this," Captain Walker said, his hand hovering over the controls. "We've already seen what this place can do. We don't know what's at the core, and we don't know what kind of danger it might pose." But Dr. Hayes was resolute. "We're too close. "We can't stop now. This is the discovery of a lifetime." With a sigh, Captain Walker reluctantly guided the submarine deeper into the city's core. The walls around them grew darker, and the light from the glowing symbols became more intense, casting long shadows across the submarine. The feeling of unease grew as they descended further into the depths of the city. The submarine's sensors began to pick up strange fluctuations in the electromagnetic field, and the temperature in the cabin began to drop. It was as if they were approaching something ancient, something that had been dormant for eons, waiting for this moment. And then they found it. At the heart of the city, deep beneath the surface, lay a massive structure unlike anything they had ever seen. It was a tower, or perhaps a spire, rising up from the ocean floor like a gigantic obelisk. The surface of the tower was covered in the same glowing symbols that adorned the rest of the city, but there was something different about this structure. It was alive, its surface pulsing with energy as though it were breathing. The signal that Dr. Lee had traced seemed to emanate from this very spire, and the closer they got, the more intense the electromagnetic fields became. The submarine's systems began to glitch, and the crew felt the pressure of the water pressing down on them from all sides. "What is this place?" Captain Walker asked, his voice filled with awe and fear. "I think it's a beacon," Dr. Hayes said, her voice barely a whisper. "This city, it's not just a city, it's a gateway, a signal, a relic from an ancient civilization. It's been waiting for something or someone to activate it." Before they could process the enormity of their discovery, the lights. Outside, the submarine flickered again. The creatures, which had been watching them from the shadows, began to gather around the spire, their bodies glowing in sync with the pulsating energy from the tower. It was as if they were preparing for something that would change the course of the expedition forever. The crew realized too late that they were no longer in control of the situation. The city had awakened, and its long-dormant forces were beginning to stir. The pulsating energy from the spire had reached a fever pitch, overwhelming the submarine's systems and filling the cabin with an eerie hum. Outside the abyssal explorer, the creatures, those glowing biomechanical entities, had gathered in a semicircle around the massive tower, their tendrils swaying in time with the fluctuating light. The air inside the submarine seemed thick, charged with an electric tension that gnawed at the edges of the crew's nerves. Dr. Emily Hayes stared out of the viewing ports, transfixed by the spectacle. The creatures were no longer just passive observers. They had become active participants in whatever was unfolding. They seemed to communicate with each other in a way that defied comprehension, an intricate dance of light, motion, and energy that suggested intelligence far beyond what any human mind could fathom. "We need to back out of here now," Captain Miles Walker said, his voice taut with urgency. His hands hovered over the controls, prepared to reverse course, but something in the back of his mind held him back. His gut told him they were about to witness something world-altering, but at what cost? Dr. Hayes shook her head, her eyes fixed on the mesmerizing light show outside. "No, we can't leave now. We've come too far to turn back. This is history unfolding. We have to understand it." "I agree," Dr. Simon Lee said, his voice shaking slightly as he monitored the readings. "But I've never seen anything like this. The electromagnetic fields, it's as if the entire city is alive. And those creatures, they're not just reacting, they're orchestrating it." As Dr. Lee spoke, the energy outside intensified. A deep, resonant hum began to emanate from the spire, vibrating through the ocean floor and reverberating through the hull of the submarine. The light patterns that had once seemed erratic and chaotic now settled into a perfect rhythm, as if they were part of a grand design. Then it happened. A burst of radiant energy shot out from the spire, enveloping the submarine in a blinding glow. The crew recoiled, instinctively shielding their eyes from the intensity of the light, but it didn't last long. The glow faded as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind a profound silence. The humming had stopped. The creatures had gone. Still, their bioluminescence dimming to a faint, almost imperceptible glow. "What the hell just happened?" Captain Walker said, his voice low and cautious. Dr. Hayes was frozen, her hands gripping the console, her breath shallow. It's like something just shifted, like a switch was flipped. Before anyone could respond, the monitors went black. All of the submarine systems, from the sonar to the navigation to the life support readings, went completely offline. The cabin lights flickered and then went out entirely. They were plunged into complete darkness, the oppressive silence broken only by the sound of the crew's hurried breaths. "We're completely blind," Dr. Lee muttered, fumbling for a flashlight. This is impossible." Captain Walker's voice cut through the panic. "We need to get out of here now." But just as he reached for the controls, a strange pressure filled the submarine. It wasn't physical. There was no shift in the water's weight, but it was undeniable. The air seemed to grow heavier, as though the ocean itself was closing in on them. The walls of the submarine felt thinner, weaker, as if they were no longer protected from the abyss. Something somewhere was reaching into the vessel, probing it. Dr. Hayes felt it too, an uncanny sensation that something was aware of them, not just outside the vessel, but inside, as if something was probing their minds, their very thoughts. I think they're trying to communicate," she whispered. "But not through light anymore. It's like they're inside our heads." Dr. Lee finished for her, his voice strained. Suddenly, the crew was bombarded with a series of fragmented images, flashes of light and shadow that seemed to come from nowhere, filling their minds with disjointed memories, thoughts, and emotions. Dr. Hayes saw herself standing on a distant shore, gazing out at a sky that was not of Earth, purple clouds swirling in a maelstrom above an alien ocean. She felt a strange pull toward it, as if it were beckoning her. And then, as quickly as the vision had come, it was gone, leaving only the faintest impression behind. "Did you see that?" Dr. Hayes gasped, clutching her head. Yes, Dr. Lee said, his face pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. "I saw the same thing." Captain Walker's eyes darted from one crew member to the next, his mind racing. What the hell was that? Was it some kind of collective hallucination? "I don't think so," Dr. Hayes replied. "It's not a hallucination. They're trying to tell us something. They're showing us something." As if to confirm her words, the submarine's systems blinked back to life. The lights flickered on, the sonar began to hum softly, and the screens slowly filled with data again, but the readings were off the charts. The electromagnetic fields, the energy signatures, they were unlike anything the team had ever seen. "We're still in the city," Dr. Lee observed, his voice trembling. "But the energy, it's increasing. It's not just the spire anymore. It's coming from everywhere." "What are we dealing with here?" Captain Walker muttered, his hands shaking as he gripped the controls. "Is this a weapon? A trap?" Dr. Hayes didn't have an answer. She was too absorbed in the data, too focused on the images that continued to flash in her mind. The alien ocean, the pulsing energy, the strange, sentient creatures. She realized now that these beings were not simply protecting their city. They were trying to communicate, yes, but not just with the crew. They were reaching out to something, or someone else. The creatures outside the submarine began to move again, this time in a more deliberate fashion. Their bodies shimmered in the water as they aligned themselves into an intricate pattern around the spire. It was as if they were preparing for something, or perhaps initiating a process. And then, with a sudden burst of light, the city responded. The walls of the structures shifted, opening up like massive doors, revealing hidden chambers and pathways leading deeper into the city. The very ocean around them seemed to come alive, rippling with an energy that felt more and more tangible. "Think it's ready," Dr. Hayes whispered as she watched the city unfold before them. "The city is waking up. It wants us to come in." "I don't know if that's a good idea," Captain Walker said, his voice low, caution flooding his words. "Whatever is happening here, whatever this city is, it's not just some forgotten relic. It's alive. And it's not just trying to communicate with us, it's controlling things." But the moment the words left his lips, the creatures outside seemed to react, their glowing tendrils rising into the water like antennae, scanning the submarine. A signal surged through the systems, and the submarine's controls momentarily locked. The crew members could feel the force of the creature's presence pressing against them. "Get us out of here!" Captain Walker barked, but as he reached for the controls again, the lights flickered, and then, suddenly, the Abyssal Explorer lurched forward as if drawn by an invisible force. "No!" Dr. Hayes shouted. "We're being pulled in!" The creatures, the city, the very fabric of the ocean itself, seemed to be responding to their intrusion, guiding them deeper into the heart of the city. The pressure inside the submarine mounted, but it was not the crushing weight of the water they feared. It was the weight of something far greater, a sentience, an intelligence, reaching out from the depths of the abyss. And the more they resisted, the more the city seemed to push them forward, into its heart, where its most ancient secrets lay waiting. The Abyssal Explorer shook violently as the immense unseen force pulled it deeper into the core of the underwater city. Captain Walker gritted his teeth, trying to override the controls, but the submarine resisted his commands. The hull groaned under the pressure, and a sharp whine filled the cabin, as if the ship were being squeezed by some external force. The crew clung to their seats, fear creeping into their veins. "What's happening?" Dr. Lee shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The systems are completely out of control." "It's not the systems," Dr. Hayes replied, her voice steady despite the rising panic. "It's something down here, the city. It's influencing us. It's manipulating the environment, the very space around us." The walls of the submarine flickered with an eerie, bio-luminescent glow, casting long, undulating shadows. The creatures outside had formed a ring around the Abyssal Explorer, their bodies pulsating in perfect harmony with the energy emanating from the heart of the city. The lights in the water seemed to grow brighter as the submarine was drawn closer, until the entire ocean around them was illuminated by a pulsating, ethereal radiance. "Brace yourselves!" Captain Walker barked as the submarine lurched forward. Again, the pressure increasing by the second. The soft hum of the sonar became a deafening roar as it struggled to map the increasingly distorted landscape around them. But despite their descent, the crew could see nothing but a swirling maelstrom of lights and shadows. It was as if the very fabric of the ocean was being bent and twisted around them. In that moment, Dr. Hayes realized the full scope of what they were experiencing. This was not just an underwater city, it was a living, breathing entity. And it had been dormant for eons, awaiting something or someone to awaken it. "We're not just visitors here," she muttered to herself. "We're intruders." And yet, despite the danger, her scientific curiosity burned brighter than ever. Whatever secrets this city held, they were waiting to be uncovered. As if in response to her thoughts, the submarine came to a sudden stop, its forward motion arrested by an invisible force. The crew exchanged confused glances, unsure of what was happening. The pressure in the cabin lifted slightly, and the deafening hum from the sonar began to fade. The submarine hung suspended in the water, surrounded by the glowing city like a moth trapped in a spider's web. "Captain, look!" Dr. Lee pointed toward the front of the submarine. Through the viewing ports, the crew could see the full extent of the structure that lay before them. It was the spire, the central tower of the city, rising from the ocean floor like a colossal dark obelisk. Its surface shimmered with an iridescent glow, reflecting the pulsing energy that surrounded it. But what stood out most were the massive, Doors opening before them like the gates of some ancient temple, inviting them in. "I don't like this," Captain Walker muttered, his gaze fixed on the massive opening. "This feels like a trap." Dr. Hayes, however, was mesmerized. "No, it's not a trap. It's an invitation. They want us to enter." Before anyone could protest, the submarine was drawn forward, gently but irresistibly, into the depths of the tower. The doors, if they could be called doors, closed silently behind them, sealing them inside. For a moment, the crew was plunged into darkness once again, the overwhelming glow of the city fading into the background. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, the lights returned, not from the outside, but from within the tower itself. The walls of the chamber they had entered began to illuminate with an intricate geometric pattern, lines and symbols running across the surface like veins of light. This is incredible," Dr. Hayes whispered, her voice full of awe. "It's not just architecture, it's a network, a neural system. Like the city is alive, thinking, processing. It's a mind," Dr. Lee said, his voice trembling. "We're inside its consciousness. This whole city, it's a vast intelligence." As the abyssal explorer descended further into the core of the tower, the space around them began to open up. They entered what appeared to be a massive circular chamber, larger than anything they had yet seen. The walls seemed to stretch out endlessly, and in the center of the chamber stood a colossal structure, like a great, pulsing heart. It was made of the same shimmering material as the spire, and it seemed to throb with an almost sentient energy. The creatures outside the submarine had followed them inside, their glowing bodies hovering around the perimeter of the chamber as though guarding the entrance. Their tendrils reached out toward the heart, brushing against it in a slow, deliberate rhythm. "The heart of the city," Dr. Hayes murmured. "It's alive, it's a central intelligence. And the creatures, they're its extensions, its agents." Captain Walker's voice broke through the quiet reverence. "Are we supposed to interact with it? I mean, how do we even begin to understand this?" "We don't have a choice," Dr. Hayes replied. "Whatever is happening here, whatever this city is, it's already affecting us. It's guiding us. It wants us to engage with it." Before they could process what she meant, the heart of the city began to change. The pulsing energy intensified, the light shifting from a soft glow to a brilliant, blinding radiance. The creatures around them started to move faster, their tendrils weaving in intricate patterns, almost as if they were preparing for something. The air in the submarine became thick, charged with an unnatural energy. The crew felt it too, the same pressure they had sensed before, only this time it was far more intense. It was as if the entire chamber was alive, breathing in time with the beating heart at its center. Dr. Hayes gripped the console, her mind racing. "It's trying to merge with us. The city, the creatures, they want us to connect with them, to become part of their network. We don't know what it means to merge with it," Captain Walker warned. "What if we lose ourselves in the process? What if this is some kind of infection?" But Dr. Hayes couldn't pull herself away from the glowing heart. It was calling to her, a pull so powerful she could feel it deep in her bones. "We have to understand it. We're standing at the precipice of a discovery that could change everything. We can't turn back now." "Emily," Captain Walker said, his voice full of concern, "you're not thinking clearly. We need to leave. Now." But just as he spoke, something shifted in the chamber. The walls seemed to pulse with an even greater intensity, and the creatures surrounding the submarine moved closer, their tendrils reaching out toward the hull, brushing against it like fingers on a pulse. The glow from the heart intensified, and the creatures' movements became more synchronized, their patterns perfectly aligned. The chamber seemed to vibrate with an energy that resonated in the crew's very bones. Then, without warning, the heart of the city opened. A massive, glowing fissure split the structure in two, revealing a pulsating core. The light from the core seemed to shine directly into the submarine, filling the cabin with a strange warmth. It was as if the heart itself was inviting them closer, drawing them into its depths. Dr. Hayes's hand hovered over the control panel, her thoughts racing. The pull was irresistible, overwhelming, but something in the back of her mind screamed that this was dangerous, far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The creatures, the city, the heart. They weren't simply offering knowledge, they were asking something from them, and that something might come at a price. The moment the heart of the city opened before them, a silent, oppressive weight fell upon the crew. They were no longer just explorers of the deep. They had become part of something far greater, something that transcended their understanding of reality. The glowing fissure in the core of the city pulsed like a living organism, casting a mesmerizing, otherworldly light throughout the chamber. The creatures surrounding them swam in intricate patterns, their bioluminescence flickering as if in synchronization with the pulsating energy of the heart. Dr. Hayes felt it first, a sensation that rippled through her body, an intense pull from deep within her chest, as if the very fibers of her being were resonating with the heart of the city. It wasn't just the energy, it was the awareness, the consciousness that enveloped her. She could almost hear the thoughts of the city, and they were beckoning her, drawing her closer to the heart. "Emily!" Captain Walker's voice was strained, laced with fear. "What are you doing? We need to leave. We don't know what this is." But Dr. Hayes couldn't look away. The heart was calling to her, and it wasn't just an impulse or curiosity. It was a deep, instinctual pull that she couldn't explain. Every part of her being screamed that this was the key to something monumental, something that humanity had never encountered before. She started to speak, but her words faltered. There was a growing awareness inside her mind, a sense that she wasn't alone in her thoughts. The creatures, the city. It wasn't just communication. It was connection. It was understanding, a merging of consciousness, and they were offering it to her, to all of them. She turned to face the crew, her expression distant, as if she were already somewhere else. "We don't understand it yet, but we need to. The city, the creatures, it's more than technology, more than biology. It's an intelligence, a consciousness that spans dimensions, and it wants to share itself with us." Captain Walker's eyes widened with alarm. "This isn't some kind of gift, Emily. This is a trap. It's using us. You heard what it did to the systems. It's manipulating the environment, the very fabric of reality around us. If we don't leave now, we might never escape." But Dr. Hayes wasn't listening. Her mind was already lost in the tide of new thoughts, the flood of information cascading into her awareness. Her hands hovered over the control panel, but she was no longer in full control of her own body. The city, the heart, was guiding her, coaxing her into making the decision to stay, to merge with it. Dr. Lee, who had been silent for most of the descent, now looked up from his own console. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and fear. "Emily, listen to me. This isn't right. We're not prepared for this. We don't know what's on the other side of that heart. What if it's too much to handle? What if it changes us? We're already starting to feel its effects." "I don't feel any different," Dr. Hayes replied, though her voice was distant. "I think we're starting to understand. The city wants us to connect, to become part of its network. We can't just observe it from the outside. We have to be part of it." Captain Walker clenched his fists. "Emily, stop. This isn't you. This is something else. We're not supposed to be here. We don't know what it wants from us. We don't even know what we'll become if we accept this connection. It's too dangerous." The submarine shuddered violently, and the lights flickered. The heart of the city throbbed again, sending waves of energy through the chamber. The creatures outside, their bioluminescence pulsing in perfect harmony with the energy, had begun to move closer. Their forms shifted and stretched, melding with the environment as if they were becoming one with the structure around them. They were no longer simply biological entities. They were integrating with the city, their forms becoming fluid, hybrid, a fusion of the organic and mechanical. "Do you see it?" Dr. Lee whispered, his voice trembling. "They're changing. They're merging with the city. They're becoming part of it. But if we do the same, if we join them, what happens to us?" Dr. Hayes blinked, her focus snapping back to the present. She could feel the pull again, stronger now. It wasn't just the city. It was the creatures, the heart, the energy surrounding them. Everything was interconnected, and it was waiting for them to make a choice. She felt it in her bones, in the very marrow of her being. If you want to understand, you must become part of it. I don't know, she murmured, her voice distant and uncertain. But this is the opportunity of a lifetime. We've come so far. If we leave now, we may never understand what this place truly is. Captain Walker's face was a mask of determination. "I'm not losing you to this, Emily. We've already seen the risks. This is not just about knowledge. It's about survival. We have to get out of here before it's too late." But as he spoke, the creatures outside moved in unison, their glowing tendrils reaching toward the submarine. They were no longer just passive observers. They were active participants, and their energy flooded into the chamber. The walls of the tower seemed to pulse in response, and the temperature in the cabin dropped suddenly, as though the submarine were being drawn into a cold, alien void. "We don't have time," Dr. Hayes said, her voice resolute. "We're already too deep. I can feel it. The heart of the city is guiding us. It's waiting for us to choose." Captain Walker took a deep breath, his fingers gripping the control panel. "If we don't leave now, we might never leave. We'll be trapped here, changed. This city, whatever it is, it's not just alive. Emily, it's a force of nature, a force we don't understand. We're not prepared for this." Dr. Lee looked between them, his face filled with anguish. "I don't know what to do. We came here for knowledge, but we never expected something like this. What if we're not ready? What if we can't handle it?" For a moment, silence hung heavy in the cabin. The heart of the city pulsed again, sending waves of energy into the very bones of the submarine. The creatures outside hovered, their eyes, if they could be called eyes, fixed on the crew, as though they were waiting for something. "Maybe we don't have a choice," Dr. Hayes said, her voice now soft, almost hypnotic. "Maybe the city has already made it for us." Captain Walker's grip on the control panel tightened. "I'm not going to let it take you, Emily." Suddenly, the heart of the city began to glow even brighter, a brilliant, blinding light that filled the entire chamber. The air thickened, becoming almost unbearable, and the creatures outside the submarine began to converge on them, their tendrils weaving through the water like serpents, their bodies melding with the structure of the tower. And then in the midst of the chaos, a voice, a deep resonant voice, filled the submarine's cabin. It was not heard through the ears, but felt, resonating deep within their minds. "The time has come." The crew froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. The voice was not human, nor was it entirely alien. It was the voice of the city itself, the consciousness of the heart, and it was calling them to make a choice, to merge, to join, to become part of something far beyond themselves. And in that moment, as the light of the city blazed brighter than the sun, they realized there was no turning back. The light from the heart of the city blazed with an intensity that threatened to consume them. It wasn't just light. It was a force, a presence that radiated from the very core of the city itself. The creatures outside the abyssal explorer had completely merged with the city's structure. their forms blending into the walls and floor, their bioluminescence pulsing in time with the heart. It was as if the entire city was awakening, breathing life back into its forgotten ancient bones. The voice, resonant and ancient, echoed through their minds again. The time has come. Dr. Hayes felt the words reverberate in her chest, vibrating through every atom of her being. She was no longer just a passenger in this moment. She was part of it, part of something far greater. The decision was upon them. The choice, to stay and merge, or to leave and abandon the potential of understanding a civilization older than time itself. But there was no time for second guessing. The submarine began to shake again, more violently this time, as though the city itself was forcing them to make their decision. The walls of the chamber pulsed with a deep, rhythmic thrum that matched the beat of the heart, and the very water around them seemed to come alive with an electric current. "Emily, we have to get out, now!" Captain Walker shouted, his voice strained with desperation. He gripped the controls, but nothing responded. The ship was no longer in his control. The city was holding them, binding them to its will. Dr. Hayes turned slowly to face him, her eyes distant, glowing with a strange, unearthly light. She wasn't just seeing the city anymore. She was feeling it, becoming it. The pull, the connection, had grown too strong to resist. It was as if the city's mind had reached inside hers, folding her consciousness into its infinite network. "I can't leave," she whispered. Her voice was a soft hum, barely audible over the growing roar of energy that filled the chamber. "I'm part of it now. We all are. There's no way out." "What are you talking about?" Captain Walker's voice cracked with panic. "Emily, this isn't you. You're not yourself anymore." But Dr. Hayes could barely hear him. She could only hear the heart, its pulse, its rhythm, the call to be one with it. And as she closed her eyes, a wave of images flooded her mind. Alien, landscapes, stars and galaxies, distant shores and skies, all of it connected by this one singular intelligence. The creatures, the city, the very fabric of space and time, they were all part of the same web, and she was now connected to it. She opened her eyes, and for a brief moment she saw something that made her heart skip a beat. A reflection of herself, but it was different. Her skin was beginning to glow, her eyes now shimmering with the same bioluminescence as the creatures outside. Her body seemed to pulse with the energy of the city, as if it were becoming part of her, transforming her into something entirely new. "Emily." Captain Walker's voice trailed off in disbelief. "Don't you see?" she said softly, her voice a strange echo. "We're all becoming part of this. We were never meant to leave." Dr. Lee, who had been standing in stunned silence, slowly reached for the console. This is impossible," he muttered. "We've crossed into something, a new realm. We can't escape it." But as he spoke, the pressure around them intensified. The walls of the submarine began to bend, as though the very water around them was trying to pull them apart. The creatures, if they could still be called creatures, had fully merged with the city, and the entire chamber was alive with energy. The glowing fissure in the heart pulsed faster, and the once distant hum of the city's power grew into a deafening roar. Then, with a sudden violent burst, the city awoke. The heart exploded, with light sending a shockwave through the ocean floor. The submarine was jerked violently, and everything went black. The last thing the crew saw before the lights went out was the heart of the city, now fully illuminated, revealing an ancient sentient being, a massive, multifaceted creature, glowing with the same light as the creatures outside. It was the source of the city, the heart of everything that had been and would be, and it was alive. The next moment, the abyssal explorer was plunged into an eerie silence, the cabin now completely dark. The hum of the city's energy had vanished, replaced by an overwhelming stillness that sent a chill through the crew. "Captain?" Dr. Lee's voice was a whisper. "What? What just happened?" There was no answer. The lights flickered back on, but what they saw next froze them in their seats. The chamber had changed. The vast metallic walls were now alive, covered in the same shimmering material as the city itself. Tendrils, glowing with the same bioluminescence, extended from the walls, moving like serpents through the water, wrapping themselves around the submarine. The creatures, once so separate, had merged with the very environment, becoming one with the structure. And then, it happened. A massive shadow loomed in front of them, an ancient alien structure rising from the depths. It was no longer just a city. It was the core of an intergalactic civilization, a civilization that had once spanned the stars. And now, it was waking. Its energy was pulsing outward, and the very ocean seemed to respond to its call. "We have to leave. We can't stay." "Here!" Captain Walker shouted, panic rising in his chest. But it was too late. The water around them began to churn, as if something massive was stirring beneath the surface. The ocean was reacting to the awakening of the city, its once still waters now, rippling with an energy that defied comprehension. The creatures, now fully part of the city, began to rise, their forms morphing and changing in ways that no human could possibly understand. The submarine began to shake violently again, this time not from external forces, but from the sheer energy emanating from the depths of the city. The ocean floor trembled as if it were alive, as if the city's awakening had triggered a cataclysmic event that would ripple through the very fabric of the planet. And then, with a deafening roar that echoed through the deep, the city, its heart, its mind, began to rise from the depths of the ocean. The abyssal explorer was caught in the wake of the eruption, tumbling through the water as the massive form of the city began to breach the surface. The creatures, now fully aware, were no longer confined to the depths. They were rising too, and as they did, the ocean itself began to ripple, sending waves across the globe. Humanity had no idea what it had just awakened, and the world would never be the same again. As the abyssal explorer was swept away by the rising tide of energy, Captain Walker's last words echoed in the cabin, almost drowned out by the deafening roar of the awakening city. "Get us out of here, before it's too late." But as the submarine was carried toward the surface, they saw it, a massive figure rising from the water, the very shape of the ancient civilization they had unearthed. It was not just a city. It was a beacon, and it was broadcasting across the stars.